So if you grew up in Hawaii and your family is here, then you're most likely very close with your grandparents. I have wonderful stories of spending time with grandma, grandpa, and even today, I think about them every single day. And I still remember walking into my grandma's house early in the morning, still dark outside, and right there on the table, she'd have breakfast ready for us. She'd have crispy bacon and Vienna sausage and of course Spam and scrambled eggs, and you cannot forget the fresh rice. But since having my own kids, I've thought a lot about what is the right balance for grandparents' assistance. We're in a place like Hawaii where we have the highest percentage of multi-generational housing. Can grandparents do too much? Do we ask too much of them? And if so, what are some of the side effects of too much family help? So I want to open up this topic on grandparents helping in Hawaii and share 3 signs that maybe grandma, grandpa are doing a little bit too much. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about what some might consider overbearing grandparents who question and do too much. I'm actually kind of looking at it from a different perspective, where it almost seems like there's an over-reliance on grandma, grandpa. I mean, treating the grandkids to zippies every once in a while is okay, but you take them out 3 or 4 times a week, that might be a little bit much. And as a parent of 2 young kids, I absolutely get it. We all need help, and the burden is definitely lessened when more people are sharing in that responsibility. However, I just want to take a step back and open up this discussion on grandparents possibly helping out too much here in Hawaii, because I don't think it's something that we often talk about. I think a lot of it is just cultural, where grandparents become the de facto babysitters, often full-time babysitters. And so I acknowledge that it's part of the local culture, and it's something that we've probably had for a very long time, but just because something is ingrained in the culture doesn't mean that we can't take a closer look and see what's actually going on there. And where better to start than my own personal experience with my grandparents growing up here in Hawaii. Now, I had a wonderful experience with grandparents here in Hawaii growing up, but I'm sure like most people, they were closer with one set of grandparents than the other. And for me, I was definitely closer with my mom's side. For my dad's side, well, my grandpa died when I was really young, and my grandma lived in Hilo and worked at the flower shop, so we only saw her maybe 2-3 times a year. But on my mom's side, I was very close, and my grandparents were very involved. Before I could attend preschool, my parents dropped off me and then later my brother at my grandma's house pretty much every day of the week because they had to go to work. And I acknowledge that I'm very fortunate, because it seemed like out of all the grandkids, my grandma said yes to me and my brother. Now, that's not to say that I didn't hang out with my other cousins and we spent a lot of time together at grandma's house, but for the most part, I think my grandma said yes to us, and so we got to benefit from all that time together. I'd eat breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner there, sometimes even taking a bath there. And sometimes we spent weekends there. And overall, I'd say I'd spent a lot of my childhood with my grandparents. Now, looking back, was that a little bit too much? I think maybe yes and no. I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents, again, during breaks and when I was a little kid before I could attend preschool. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, but I also spent a lot of time with my own parents. The only times that I was with my grandparents was when my parents had to work, which was a lot because, as most people probably know, you need 2 incomes to survive here in Hawaii. Things are expensive. Even back when I was growing up, things were still pretty expensive. And I never felt like my parents abdicated their responsibilities as parents and pushed it onto my grandparents. They just had to work, and so I spent time with my grandparents at their house. And so in that sense, I felt like I had a healthy relationship with my parents, who were my parents, and had those roles and responsibilities. And I also had a good relationship with my grandparents, who had the roles and responsibilities of being grandparents. And maybe our local culture, sometimes those things are blurred, depending on how many parents are in the household or the current living situation. But for me, it was never really that blurred. It was simply, these are my parents and these are grandma, grandpa. All right, so now let's talk about 3 signs that maybe grandma, grandpa in Hawaii are doing a little bit too much. Now, before going into this, I know that it's a very sensitive topic for some. I don't know everyone's family situation or their circumstances. I'm just speaking in generalities here. And so if people disagree, that is absolutely okay. I just think it's important to have this open discussion and to open this up to take a closer look at something that I think oftentimes we take for granted. All right, so sign number one, that maybe grandma, grandpa are helping out a little bit too much here. The child spends more time with the grandparents on average than with their actual parents. And I know that this one is a tricky one because, like I mentioned, we have the highest percentage of multi-generational households in the country, and it's not even close. And by multi-generational households, I'm meaning 3 or more generations living under the same house. And how this plays out in real life is that grandma, grandpa are most often always there for babysitting, for sharing in certain responsibilities, for running chores, picking up, dropping off kids, doing the cooking, and generally taking care of the kids. But I think this becomes a little bit too much when it's expected and when it's all the time. And I'm sure that it's very difficult to navigate as a grandparent. I'm sure it's very challenging because on the one hand, you want to spend time with your grandkids. You're willing to do all the things for them because you love them and you want to care for them. But I think it goes a little bit too much when it's just assumed or presumed, or it's just sort of maybe taken for granted that the grandparents will watch the kids no matter what. And so just to share kind of what we do with our family, my parents watch my oldest son typically 1 weekend a month. Now sometimes they may watch both boys or one of the boys for like off days where if we have like a parent-teacher conference or something is happening, and they can step in and they can watch the boys like that. But typically it's 1 weekend a month. Because I really try not to burden my parents with watching the kids every weekend. I mean, sure, it'd be great. Just drop them off on the weekend, or heck, my parents could pick them up on Friday and me and my wife get Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning all to ourselves. But personally, I think that's actually a little bit too much. On top of that 1 weekend a month, they also are involved where they spend time with the boys too. They attend swimming classes or other things. Maybe they stop by our place and they can just watch the boys, but typically we're there too. And if one day I get to be a grandpa and I have my own grandkids, when it comes to spending time with them, I want to look forward to it. I want it to be a very special occasion so that when they come over to our house or I come over to their place and watch the kids, it's a special occasion and that I'm excited about it. I was talking with my dad the other day about how Ho'omaluhia is opening up their fishing to the public again. And way back in the day, way back in the day, my dad was one of the OGs to fishing at Ho'omaluhia. Back then, you could fish once a month and it was like on a certain weekend, and that was it. And I remember back then because sometimes I'd go with my dad too. And because it was once a month, my dad looked forward to it so much. He would tie up and make his own lures. He'd like customize his tackle box for what he thought the fish might like for that particular month, for those specific weather conditions. And my dad really got excited every single month when it was that 1 weekend to go fishing. But then what started happening was Ho'omaluhia opened it up to every weekend. And of course now they're opening it up to twice a week where you can sign up for that. And he was just sharing how, because now it's so often, how it's not once a month, it's several times a month. He's not looking forward to it as much as when it was just once a month. And so when it comes to watching our boys, I want to make sure that when they do watch them, that they feel like it's special, that they look forward to it, that it's something that brings them joy rather than something that brings them dread. Okay, now sign number 2. The only reason the child is able to attend private school is because grandma, grandpa pays for the entire tuition. Almost forgot about mid-pack there. I know. Let me kind of unwrap this one a little bit. In Hawaii, private school is all the rage. Generally, people look down on public school, and so you gotta do whatever it takes to get your kid into private school, especially if you can, one of those elite private schools. Now, of course, I do want to acknowledge those parents who do sacrifice and they work really hard to pay for their child's private school tuition if that's what they so choose. I know that there are parents out there who make a lot of sacrifices, not just the financial ones, but with their time. They gotta drive absolutely understand that. And so I want to acknowledge that. I mean, that's incredible. And so I think it's not so much the private school issue. I think maybe it's more of this hint of elitism that sometimes is associated with private schools here in Hawaii. You know what I'm talking about, right? Or is it just me? As someone who went to both private and public school, I could tell you, it's there, but sometimes I get a little bit stirred up when I hear that hint of elitism, especially when it's grandma, grandpa paying for most of that tuition. And I get it, everyone's financial situation is different, and not all kids who go to private school get help from grandma, grandpa. I know that a lot of the kids get financial assistance. I mean, why do you think they have Punahou Carnival and Iolani Fair? But what sometimes gets me in those moments of my own weakness is some of the people who have that kind of elitist attitude about going to private school, when frankly, they wouldn't be able to send their child, or they wouldn't have been able to go if it wasn't for grandma, grandpa. I mean, like, if you got the big bucks or your parents make the sacrifice to send you there, that's wonderful. You know, go for it if that's what you're looking for. But I think if the only reason that the kid is able to go to private school is because of grandma, grandpa, just remember, when you're looking down, or better yet, talking down to everybody else, that you just remember that it was because of help that you're able to send the kid there, that the kid was able to have those wonderful opportunities because of help, because of grandma, grandpa. And maybe that might put it into perspective. Now, obviously that's not every family, but I have encountered some of those families already, and I just shake my head and wonder if they know what they're saying, if they know how it's coming across. Because personally, I think a child's education is the responsibility of the parents, not just the academic learning, but also whatever financial responsibilities are tied to that education. Now, if grandma, grandpa want to pitch in and give money, then that's their prerogative. Who am I to say what they can do with their money? It's their money if they want to help. And while there probably are a lot of grandparents out there who have the extra cash to give away to their grandkids' education, I'm sure that there are some who are completely strapped, and they are making another sacrifice for the next generation to send the grandkids to the private school. And I'm sure that they love to use the money for themselves. Maybe extra trips to Vegas or Japan, or maybe fix up the house, buy another car. Now, how this plays out in our life, my parents asked if they wanted us to help out with paying for preschool, because as you know, preschool can be pretty expensive. And we got 2 kids in preschool. And while I appreciated their offer, I told them no. I told them that I appreciate them being willing to help. It's always great to know that, you know, we have that support. But I told them and explained to them that I felt like my kids' education, the cost of that is my responsibility. That means that we have to make certain sacrifices as a family for now, as we continue to pay for preschool, but that it will be worth it. And frankly, I'm pretty sure that if they ended up paying for the school, whatever money we would have saved, we would just spend it frivolously on unimportant things, and we wouldn't necessarily learn the good habits on how to budget or how to save. And I actually think that those things are a lot more important and things that I want to pass on to my kids. That yeah, sometimes it's gonna be a little bit tight, but we'll figure it out and we'll make it work. And again, maybe this isn't so much about the financial giving part, it might be more so about that other part, that attitude part that for me, I have a hard time with. But maybe that's just me. All right, and sign number 3 that maybe grandma and grandpa are doing a little bit too much. The grandparents are tired and burned out, and they say they need a break. I mean, sometimes we all need a break from certain things. However, I hope that it's never a break from grandkids. From your own kids, yeah, yeah, you got me there. Absolutely, sometimes we need a break from our own kids, but from your grandkids, they're supposed to be the reward, right? That's supposed to be the fun time for the grandparents. Sometimes when I'm out and I see grandparents that maybe they look a little bit overwhelmed or they look a little bit tired, I kind of wonder if they ever feel that, if they ever bring that up. Maybe it's a conversation that people have only in their home, and it's probably where it should be kept. But I just wonder sometimes if they feel a little bit overwhelmed. And again, this must be a tough spot to be in as a grandparent. I mean, you want to spend time with your grandkids. But I don't think people want to feel manipulated or guilted into spending time with their grandkids. Like when it becomes too much, then maybe it's time to reevaluate those responsibilities. How this plays out in my own family is pretty straightforward. I think communication has really helped between me and my parents. My dad is usually very open to watching the boys. Like he's asking like, oh, when's the next time we can spend time with them? When can we see them again? And when can they come over? And that's very wonderful to hear. But my dad has also said no at times. Just some weekends when he's just really tired or he's got a work thing, I'm just like, no, you have to respect that. And I think it's really good that my dad is comfortable saying no, that my mom is comfortable saying, you know what, this is not really a good weekend, maybe next week. And what that does too is it makes me more aware that my parents have lives of their own, that they got things that they gotta do, that they want to do, and that they're not just here to serve us. They're here to help, but they're not here to serve us. And I think that's a very important thing. And the thing is, I'm not saying that we don't ask for help. I mean, if we have the help, I think that's wonderful, and it's one of the advantages that us local people have when it comes to raising kids here in Hawaii versus our mainland or international counterparts. They don't have grandparents readily available, and that can be tough. But I do think that we need to create limits and boundaries and talk about what those limits and boundaries are so that we're not burning out our grandparents, so that they're not just, oh, every single weekend they gotta watch the kids. You know what I mean? When it comes to setting limits for how much grandparents are involved, I think that's something that each family will have to think about and talk about and decide for themselves. I'm not here to make a blanket statement for every single person. For us, like I said, one weekend a month, that's plenty. But I do think that when it comes to grandparents' help, I don't think that it can be a blanket yes every single time. And my parents have said no to watching the boys, and I think that's a good thing. It reminds me that I have to schedule things out with them, that they have their own life and they have their own things that they're trying to do, and that watching the kids and spending time with them should be a special occasion. It shouldn't be something that they dread, but something that they look forward to. And this balance for our family is something that we're gonna have to reevaluate every season as the boys get older, as they have different responsibilities, different schools, different activities. We're gonna have to figure out how this all works, but I think it's important that we at least talk about it. And maybe it's gonna be an awkward conversation. Absolutely, maybe it's gonna be very awkward and weird talking about it with your parents, but I think that it's important to be upfront and open about this, because you don't want to build any resentment, because that leads to then bitterness, and with that bitterness, it's really hard to have trust. And that's not the type of family that I really want to be in. So let me know your thoughts on this. Thanks for watching, and aloha.